Hello, my name is Josh, and today I am bringing you into the world of Pine. This is a science fiction world I'm currently writing, and today I will be reading a short story set in the universe. So without further ado, I bring you Pine, a claim of pen and paper. Apollo walked across the ground he believed was his. He looked up to the imposing, famous pine trees the planet was so named after. Their canopy was large, casting shadows across vast distances. The bluish-green color of the needles contrasted well with the dreary gray sky. Apollo thought they were quite ominous, tall, unmoving, always still. It was as if they were watching. And maybe they had been. Pine, Apollo thought arrogantly. What a simple name for a simple place. Apollo had smooth skin, smooth as the silk he wore. His eyes were a dim brown. They always looked joyful, though Apollo rarely felt as such. His hair was curly blonde, brushed back behind his head and monotone all the way through, with only the slightest of the highlights at the tips. His nose sharp, his build tall and lengthy, his hands craggy and brittle. Apollo wore a silk robe that stretched just above the ground. It was the most comfortable of outfits, hugging his body in a softness so sweet. But today he felt no such softness, for his uncomfortably tight combat suit wrapped his body underneath. The robe was a gift for his 18th birthday. It gleamed a muted purple from head to toe. It imposed a sense of wealth. But at what cost? Jesse was a young tribal boy. His looks nearly mirrored Apollo, but his hair was wild and deeply highlighted, to the extent of a gradient, from a dark strawberry blonde to a bright sun-kissed pale. He wore no silk either. He donned a tunic made by his grandma from familiar wool. His grandma raised sheep in their family permaculture and often made clothing for the entire family. Jesse had been a gentle and light-hearted kid, but through the morning his eyes sulked with a hollow anger and deep dismay. Jesse knew what today had to offer. Apollo was to log the planet for its tall pines. His family was desperate for money. By imperial decree, they had lost their claim to the redwoods on planet Fornia. To Apollo, they were just trees, another item to be processed and sold. The money would keep his family comfortable and fed. To Jesse, the trees were more. The trees were shelter from the harsh rains. They bore branches for tools. The sap healed ailments. Many within the tribe had died under the watchful eyes of the pine trees. To Jesse, the pines were sacred. Jesse approached Apollo with the gaze of a man running on fumes, but deep within his mind he held coals for which he could burn when the necessity arose. And it would. Apollo had a slim grin besmirched across his face, a grin that reveled in ego and superiority. Apollo had dealt with these types of savages. He did not care for their speaking of mysticism. To him, the bottom line mattered more than some silly beliefs. I have found a nice piece of land for you and your tribe to relocate, just as I promised. You can live your days in peace and prosperity in the mountains due west. It's a nice view, and there's plenty of... Apollo's suggestion was cut off. You can't understand, blurted Jesse. He said it calmly with only the slightest inflection of the intense anger he withheld. These trees have seen generations of my people grow and die. We cannot, will not, relocate. Then who is to pay for me and my family's journey here? We have quotas to make, debts to pay. I struggle to see why you care so much for these trees. I don't want this to come to violence. My family is known greatly for their skills in combat. Apollo's smile made way for a much more calloused and frustrated expression. He was bluffing about his family skills, and Jesse knew this. Who gave you a claim to this land? Jesse questioned. Well, I have the claim right here. Apollo pulled out a tan-colored piece of paper with the imperial sigil engraved into its surface. Do you want to see my decree? Jesse beckoned. I believe you have none. The Imperial Senate does not give. Jesse once again interrupted. Look back there, Apollo. Look at my wife. Oh, how beautiful she is. We've been wed for only a short time. Look at her as she takes sap from the tree and feeds it to my ill grandma and her pregnant sister. She's not the first to do this. Her mom, her grandma, and her grandma's grandma all took from that same tree to cure the ills of her family for millennium. And we have persisted off this land for far longer. If that is not a claim, then I can only wonder as to what is. This is, Apollo retorted smugly, holding up his decree again. Then violence it must be, my dear Apollo. I invoke duel upon us, Jesse said coldly, never once breaking eye contact. Apollo knew it would likely come to this, but the moment of actualization was petrifying. Apollo had high confidence in his ability to beat an untrained tribal member, but the risks still persisted. Despite the risks, he needed the trees. The family name had been besmirched from shipcrafters to mere arborists in a matter of just a few generations, and even that livelihood had begun to see its fruits stripped away by the imperial decree. This is where he took his stand. It was an honest living, and he would not give in to the savage. He pulled out his dueling dagger gifted to him from the depths of his robe. The dagger was a customary gift given to those who come of age for combat. Ranged weapons had been forbidden millennia ago by Imperial Senate. They were too destructive. Of course, the Imperium held onto their own stockpile, but this was no bearing on the events yet to unfold today. Apollo took one last glance towards Jesse. He saw a deep emotion within the boy about his age. For the first time, Apollo felt genuine sympathy for those he was told were animals. Jesse had not moved but to grab his own knife. He glared at Apollo with eyes not usually plastered on a killer. His eyes were guilty, even before they witnessed a crime. Jesse knew what was to come and struggled to bear the weight. Outworlders had become more common, and usually the young men were sent as scouts, tasked with gaining honor, eventually rising in the family ranks. In all of them, no matter their differences, Jesse saw himself. People that were just trying to do what they had to do. The families that came were ignorant, Jesse knew, but that ignorance was no sentence for death. Already tears began welling up in the corners of his eyes as he took in the livelihood of Apollo one last time. "Why must you have come here, my dear Apollo?" Jesse whispered. Apollo removed his robe, revealing a standard-issue, deep gray combat suit, worn to enhance his strength and shield his body from mere grazes of the knife. The suit was tight, as most combat suits were. It bore his family sigil over the place where his heart currently beat. The sigil was a bright yellow lion surrounded by a pale purple background. Jesse's wife Esther handed him his combat suit. The rubber-like material was dirty from recent duels. A few holes had formed, and it reeked of exertion and salt from sweat and tears. Esther looked at Jesse with longing eyes. He could not meet her gaze, as this was not the man she had married. This man had become a monster, a killer, and his tribe praised him for it, but Jesse couldn't find a way out. He loved his tribe, and would not watch businessmen plumage the land for their wealth. If only they could see that the wealth was already in the land, no processing needed. Jesse regretted that Apollo would never learn this wealth. He would die only getting a glimpse of such knowledge from what little his life dared to offer. Jesse changed into full combat garb and donned a long knife made from the finest of iron, crafted by his deceased father's own two hands. He wore a waist tie traditionally worn by the tribe in times of combat. It was composed of a tan string and had a different colored bead for each battle fought. Jesse fidgeted with each bead, paying respects and taking a moment to breathe in the world around him. He closed his eyes, searching for peace in the most violent of moments. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Apollo too was ready. Jesse gave a knowing nod directly at Apollo. Their eyes locked. They circled each other. He saw just by the look in Apollo's eyes, the fight had been won. He was a desperate man. Desperate men are dangerous, but flawed. This fight would be over shortly either way. Apollo went through his mind, calling upon his lessons in life. He watched his memories, his partner Afro dancing upon the vibrant flowers of the planet Pastura, his sister painting the most beautiful of abstract art, his mom laughing as they enjoyed a hearty lunch. It may all be gone, but to Apollo, the fight was not over. He had been trained by his uncle for years. He didn't want to disappoint. Stressful thoughts of debt and woes urged Apollo to make the first move. He lunged towards Jesse with a stabbing motion. Jesse saw the opening. His reflexes were quick. Like watching his body from outside itself, he witnessed as he sidestepped and parried. This shocked Apollo, and a moment of doubt infiltrated his mind. This moment was too long. People say that your whole life flashes before your eyes at this time, but Apollo only saw Jesse. Jesse stabbed through Apollo's family sigil. He grasped the back of Apollo's neck, ensuring the knife would kill. Duels couldn't end in a draw, with conflicts left unfinished. This duel was over, as Apollo's knife slipped from his trembling fingers, falling and bouncing from the ground. As Apollo fell, Jesse removed his knife from his chest. He held Apollo in his arms and let tears stream from his own face. Apollo felt in his last moments as his opponent's silent cry turned into a hysteric sob. The deep breaths were erratic, and Apollo felt them imprinting against his chest. With his last bit of strength, Apollo did what little left he could do. He reached out his arms and embraced Jessie, sharing deep, hoarse breaths and a single tear. All the while, the pine stood tall, watching the tragedy that had unfolded today. Thank you for listening, and I thoroughly hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestions on my writing, or really anything, I'd love to hear them. And if this brought you even just a little bit of joy or entertainment, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching.